footage, battery life, usability, and workflow. One X, One R, GoPro MAX begins now. I'm such a dork. Greetings and salutations. I am Scojo, Insta360 One R in my hand, and that is leading me to my topic for today, which is I'm going to break down the three cameras that I've put to the test, the One X, the One R, and the GoPro MAX. I'm going to tell you my feelings about how they operated, and then I'll tell you what I personally would buy, but this is really just to give you the information for you to make the decision because, frankly, we could be very different shooters. I am somebody who likes to be in the outdoors. I push my cameras to the limit. A lot of times I have to worry about battery life and durability, but some of you are just going to be taking it around to Disneyland and fun with friends and stuff like that. So these cameras all represent something different for each person. Let's break it down. Okay, we will be breaking down three cameras, four criteria, and we're going to compare them back to back. Now, again, these are all cameras that I've used. I've used the One X for, well, basically since it came out, the Max since it came out, and I've had a One R on loan to me for the last week and a half, and I have really put it through the paces. I've been out shooting a lot of stuff with this. I got a lot more video about this camera upcoming, but we're going to break down first the One X. This was my little baby. This was, I hated this thing so much at one point when it first came out that I literally made a video you can check that said why I basically regretted the decision why I would not buy this camera. Thankfully, with a lot of patience and desire and working with customer service, the One X has gotten itself under control. And this is kind of has been my backup camera. Now let's break down the first of the criteria, battery life. Now, when it first came out, the One X came with this kind of battery. It was horrible in cold weather. Then they came out with a cold weather battery. Basically just has a blue thing on the bottom instead of a gray. And it was pretty impressive. I was getting over an hour on this tiny little thing, that tiny little battery. Now I hear they've come out with a different battery now that is supposed to be all encompassing. I have not heard back on that. Leave your comments below if you have any experience. But now that they got the cold weather situation underway, or they've got it underhand, it made this camera a lot easier to work with because I'm always out in the woods. Now, as far as battery life, I was able to get about a little over an hour on the cold weather battery, and then with the straight up battery in non-cold weather, it was about 45 minutes or so. So I'm not a huge fan of the battery life on this one. Of the three, I would say it's the worst. But it does work, and it's really easy to remove the battery, which is nice. I mean, so I've got like 8 of these things. So, not a huge complaint with the battery life. Let's talk a little bit about the usability. One of the things I like about the One X is that it just has you just screw it onto the selfie stick. And so that means that unlike a GoPro mount, which can swivel back and forth, which you don't want on a 360 camera because you'll see your selfie stick, it's just right there. It's very light. I like the longer profile. It's actually just a very light, easy to use camera with the selfie stick. And so from that point of view, the usability is awesome. There are a few areas where it sucks. The first place where this thing bites is in the display. I don't know if you'll be able to see this thing power up, but you can never see it power up. This screen, while I'm glad it at least existed, because some of the cameras that came out at the same time as it didn't have displays, which is, I don't know why you'd bother, but this thing, the display is worthless unless you're indoors. It just dies. You just can't see it in any kind of light. I have ruined more shots than I can remember just sitting there looking, and I've literally had times where I was out thinking I was shooting in one mode and I was shooting in something different. The screen on here is just literally one of the worst parts of this camera. And of course, the other thing about it is the durability. I mean, this is just plastic and you've got your lenses here. Now, they did kind of come up with a nice little neoprene cover that covers this and you can wrap it around your neck, and that's really nice. But just about everybody I know that's gotten one of these cameras breaks a lens at some point. It's like $108, I believe it is, to get it replaced, and you have to send it to China to get it fixed. So durability wise, the One X, bottom of the heap. Now, as far as footage goes, the One X is actually quite nice. I've liked it since it came out. It's 5.7K in 30 frames per second, 24 frames per second, 25 frames per second. And it looks pretty good. They've come out with this new Color Plus, which kind of works and kind of doesn't. I don't particularly like it that much, but there is a thing that enhances the color on it. But overall, just straight out of the camera, I think this one looks good. It also has 50 frames per second. It also has 100 frames per second. So I'm loving the slow motion on this thing. And really, the footage is one of the strong points for the One X. As far as the workflow goes for the One X, it started out pretty rough. You have two options. You can use an app and you can use their studio software, which I haven't used the studio software in quite some time because it just kind of irritated me. You can only do one clip at a time. They may have changed that. I will be finding out soon. And there's just what you can do, slow motion in it. It was a very difficult software to work with. I discovered the app and started digging into it, and I was months into it, basically not even doing much of my editing on the app. I take everything into Premiere and keyframe and move. And then I found the viewfinder mode on the One X, which is, I believe it's like called overcapture on the GoPro. And all you do is move your tablet or your smartphone, and that guides where the 360 goes in editing. So it's all in real time. It's much smoother than keyframing. And if you don't realize how much of a miracle it is to be able to edit video like this instead of keyframe change, then you haven't edited enough video like I have. It is a godsend to have a function like that. Overall, the app works pretty well. I do most of my editing now in the app, but then again, I don't really do that much other than just have fun with cameras like this. So I'm just looking for, I don't need it to be the highest resolution, which if you want that, you've got to take it into your desktop software. I just want something that looks cool, that's easy to edit, and that I can share with my friends and make myself look cool if that was possible. So overall, after all the headaches I had early on with the Insta360 One X, I still very much consider this a very solid camera. It's one that is not very durable. So if durability is as high to you as it is to me, I would not recommend this one. It's not waterproof either. But if you just want a good 360 camera for a decent price, this is definitely a solid camera. All right, now let's talk about the GoPro MAX. This is one camera that I had huge hopes for and came up about 75%. It does have the GoPro mount. Surprisingly, the GoPro MAX has a GoPro mount. And the one thing I don't like about that is that it works great, you know, for a GoPro, you're going to want to angle it all over the place. But for a 360 camera, if it's bent, you're going to see the selfie stick in the image. So you have to be really careful when you're out shooting with these that it doesn't get knocked and bent a little bit. Otherwise, it's going to somewhat ruin some of your footage. It's still not the end of the world, but that's the first thing about it. Now, as far as battery life, this one impressed me. The battery isn't all that big, and it charges. It takes about an hour to charge, and it holds up pretty darn well in the cold. Now, the coldest I took it was around 30 degrees, which if you live in a cold place, 30 degrees isn't really that cold. That's -1 Celsius. But it shot for like an hour and a half. I mean, solid. I didn't turn it off. The thing, the battery really impressed me on that. Now, I didn't do any like high frame rates or any of the things that really chug the engine on this. I just put it in 5.7K and let it run. So battery life wise, I give this one major thumbs up. The other thing about the Max, of course, is it's a GoPro, and they do a couple of things very well, durability and footage. Now, as far as footage goes, this is 5.6K at 30 frames a second, and I believe, did they have 24? I can't remember. You can put it in the comment section below. But anyway, it's on paper, you know, 5.6K, 5.7K, a little bit less, but GoPro usually has the best overall footage, at least up to this point. There are a few things about it. Occasionally, when you get into shadow and sunlight, it tends to white balance kind of strangely, but overall, the quality level of it is good. The problem with the GoPro Max is that there's no slow-mo in 360. That's right. The GoPro Max is basically just a GoPro Hero with 360 capabilities. You can get some 60 frames per second in just traditional Hero mode. So this can be used as a Hero, not just as a 360 camera. Has a great screen. Very intuitive. Love the screen. But you can only shoot in basically normal motion, 30 frames per second, with no slow motion in 360, which to me was a gigantic error on their part. And I know in a lot of the forums, people are complaining about this too, that, you know, it's an action camera. You should have the ability to shoot slow motion. Why? Because everything looks cooler in slow motion. As far as usability is concerned, this one is as good as any other camera. Again, the screen is awesome. You can read it in light. You can. The only thing you can't do is scroll. Like, it's not touch sensitive like that, but it's a very good looking screen. They also give you lens covers, but also these lens protectors that are clear. Now, you will get some light refraction through this if it's super bright, so it won't solve all your problems. But I mean, that is one sturdy camera. It's waterproof, I believe, down to 5 meters. So as far as usability, this one is at least tied for first. Now, as far as workflow goes, GoPro has an interesting idea. Now, I don't know that their workflow is any better or worse. I've heard people on both sides of the camp. I basically think both workflows are pretty darn good. GoPro has some advantages in that you don't have a separate app for each camera. Now, sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, but I've heard people complain that, you know, hey, we don't want to have to use the One R app. Can we use it on the One X, that type of thing. GoPro, it's all within one app, and it makes doing like little stories and stuff a little bit easier. But overall, I'd say that the workflow for all these cameras are relatively similar. But, you know, if I'm going to take a camera where I don't know how the environment's going to play out, this is certainly going to be on my list. Its major pluses are its usability, its footage looks great right out of the camera. It just needs slow motion. Slow motion. Slow motion. Next up, the One R. Now, I just had this on loan. I have to return it soon. I will say that this camera has come very close to solving all the problems with the One X for me that I had with the first one. First of all, touchscreen. Yeah, and it's actually, you can scroll in 360. It's not as easy to use as the GoPro screen, but you can see it in the light. I do like these lens covers, though. Don't be an idiot like me and try to stick them over that way, thinking that's the way you're supposed to go. Like that. Really nice. They are going to have some lens covers for going underwater, all that fun stuff, but this one is waterproof to 5 meters. There are a couple things that are irritating about it. One is it is that GoPro mount, so now you're dealing with the chance for your camera to get turned, and then all of a sudden you can see your selfie stick. So remember, with a 360 camera, you just want to have it vertical. Like, don't worry about if it's not facing right at you, because you'll be able to do that in editing. But just watch out that this thing doesn't, you know, get revealed. Also, the other thing that's kind of a pain with this one is that it's in this little case. See, as you can tell, it's not the easiest thing to get in and out of. And the camera, I've heard, is locking up on people. It's locked up on me once, but many people have said that they've heard it locking up. It's not that easy to get in and out. Now, there is a solution to this soon that I'm very excited about, is that the battery on this thing is just this little red spot. They're going to make a double battery that has the screw right there, so you won't have to use the bracket. I'm very excited for that. This one also comes with not the just 360, but it's modular, so you can get a 1-inch sensor camera that's traditional video, and you can also do a 4K one that's, you know, more like a GoPro Hero. So I'll be curious to see how the modular plays out on this one, because, you know, sometimes modular sounds like a good idea and an execution is horrible. So far, I'm fairly impressed with how this thing is playing out. Now, keep in mind, this thing is waterproof down to 5 meters, 16 feet. You do have to keep it assembled. You can't have these things separate in order for it to be waterproof. But you know, the modularity of this thing, or modulation, whatever you call it, is kind of cool. Irritating at times, because like if I want to take my 360 out and I want to shoot 4K, I've got to carry a separate thing for it in order to do it. But all in all, it's really not that annoying. As far as build goes on this thing, it's fairly decent to use once you figure out how they wanted you to use it. As far as battery life on this thing, it's not bad. It does, I recorded, I believe, 35 minutes in the cold, but this was like about 17 degrees Fahrenheit, so, you know, fairly cold. And it died after like 35 minutes. The other thing I don't like about it is that the shot that I was shooting when it died lost forever. So if you're in a cold environment, you think you're about to run out of battery, do not be running and counting on that footage to be there. So I'm not hugely impressed with the cold weather performance on this battery. Overall, it's not half bad when it's not cold. I think getting that double battery is going to be a big deal for me, because assumptively that will double the life. Now, the footage on the One R is basically take a One X and bump it up a notch. They have a new compression, H.265 instead of H.264. It's definitely a noticeable notch. They're the same frame rates. All the frame rates are the same on the One R as it is on the One X. That's a little bit disappointing, but I still like the fact that you can get 50 frames per second, which is really my favorite way to go, and then 100 frames per second at 3K. It's a little bit granular, but it's still 100 frames per second, still looks pretty cool. So the footage on this thing is solid. When you take it into the app, you can do some playing around with it, and overall, I would say it's tied for first for quality of footage. The usability on this thing is kind of a mix. I mean, again, I do not like this thing. It's really kind of difficult to get the camera in and out of sometimes, and it's locked in. Now there is a good, that'll help with protection and everything, so there is a really good reason to have something like that. It's just kind of an annoyance. It makes things hard to get in and out of, and I don't like the connection here, but that moves back and forth. But overall, it's really not that big of a deal. It's more of an annoyance. And I also love the fact that it has the screen. Now the screen is really cool. Here's a pro tip for you. When you fire it up in 360, what you see may be facing away from you. If you want to selfie it, just double tap and it'll turn and look at you. So you can actually see live what's going on. You can scroll around in 360. The interface is intuitive. It's easy to use. There are some new functions in this one as far as like taking some night time lapses and things like that were not in the One X. So overall, the usability on this thing is, I'd give it a A-. And of course, what is a camera without workflow? Let's just put it to you this way. If a camera is really good, but it's got horrible workflow, don't get it. It's a bad idea. You got to have good workflow. Thankfully, right now, a lot of the bugs have been taken out of the workflows for all these cameras, so they're all starting to become pretty good. The One R, I do have a video upcoming about the app where I get more in-depth, hands-on with it, and overall, my impressions of it are fairly positive. They still have little tiny, it's hard to read screen letters and things like that, but there are a lot of capabilities within the app and ways to now connect more than one clip. People were asking for that. So overall, the workflow for this camera is, I'd give it a thumbs up. Okay, so of these three, which one should you buy? That's up to you, but I'll break down the pros and cons, and then I'll give you my pick. The One X is inexpensive. It's got great looking footage. It's still a very relevant camera. It's just not really made to be outdoors that much. The display is horrible. The durability isn't so great, but it's light, it's easy to use, and the workflow is good. If you don't need high demands on a camera and you don't have a lot of money, this is your camera. The GoPro MAX is a little bit more expensive, but the footage is really nice out of this. It's very durable, and it's got a great screen on it. Again, the only thing that really kills the Max in my book is the lack of slow motion. If they can get at least 50, 60 frames a second on a firmware update, I think the Max would have a lot more success. Overall, this camera would only really be good if you need something that's durable and you're more of a traditional video person, like you use GoPro Heroes and things like that, and you just want 360 as an aside. And me being what would be the biggest skeptic of this camera, because I was such a big skeptic of the One X when it first came out, I have to say that so far my experience with this hardcore for a week and a half, it has surpassed my expectations. This thing is waterproof, which was a big deal. It's way more durable. It's got the touch screen, it's got 360, it's got 4K, it's got low light 1-inch sensor in traditional video. There are a lot of reasons why this camera has surpassed my expectations. And for somebody who is outdoorsy, who needs to abuse things, and maybe you drop things on occasion, and you want to make sure you have good footage and you have slow motion options, of all the three cameras, for me personally, it's the One R. All right, well, thank you for tuning into the smackdown between the One X, the One R, and the GoPro MAX. Make up your own mind. Tell me what you're thinking in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit subscribe, ring the bell on the side, and please share this video with your friends. We are the 360 community. This is our podcast. Send me in your videos with your reviews, and if I use them on the air, you'll get a kind word from me. I appreciate it. All right, that is it for the 360 Community Podcast. Let's close it like we always do. Join me, will you?